Thank you very much for your general support. Very, very appreciated. And I would like to add a special thank you also to Javier Esquerra, who is the sub-director of the DG Forestry at the region. Is Javier? Please stand up. Thank you very much for your regular support to Cesefor and your kindness. Thank you very much, Javier. The first good news of the day is that we are not in late after the opening session, which is almost a miracle. Thank you very much for respecting the time. My work, so it's very easy and I'm happy about it. So now it's time to work now. So let's switch to the first session. I would like to ask to all the work package leaders of the ONEforest project to come here. These chairs are for you, please. Work package leaders, come here. Yeah, it's a surprise, I know. But we want to know you. This is for facilitating the networking, of course. It's important because after this session, we will have a dynamic called the poster tour. And the work package leaders will stand beside their poster and enter in details, okay? So now, so you can see the faces. Well, let's start with the opening of the session. Well, you have to know that from Brussels, from the European Commission, the two participants couldn't join us personally because it's very complicated for bureaucratic reason to get the approval of the mission. But normally we have connected online our project officer from the Research Executive Agency of the European Commission, Nicolas Faivre. Please confirm me, Javier, if Nicolas is available.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see Nicolas and also Thomas. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, both. Nicolas, please, the floor is yours to open the session, please.
Thank you very much. Is the connection okay? Yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. So thanks for the introduction. And so my name is Nicolas Faivre, indeed. So I had the pleasure I have still the pleasure to be the project officer of the project ONEforest. Very sorry not to be able to attend in person this conference, but nonetheless, it is a pleasure to participate to this final conference. And thanks a lot to the organizers for making this possible. Just before saying a few words about the project, I wanted actually to also stress the very good, let's say, collaboration that we have with the project. So together with REA, so the Research Executive Agency managing the project, the good collaboration we had with Sandra Krommes and also with Martin Brunsmeier. So thank you both. Yeah, this made really I think this collaboration, the project, very stand out. So over the last 3 years, so as Sandra mentioned, so the project ONEforest has contributed to deliver pioneer work by evaluating and demonstrating methods to bring together forest owner, society, industry to agree on common forest management scenarios at regional scale. And these partners have managed to formulate recommendations on methods and joint decision makings, which can be applied in different contexts across Europe. And through this collaborative development of such scenarios, so spanning the next 40 years, the ONEforest has been actively shaping the future of forest in Europe, as these scenarios can play a really pivotal role in guiding policy decisions, shaping effective management strategy, while also ensuring a sustainable and resilient future for European forests. So at the core of ONEforest, as it was mentioned before, is the development of this multi-criteria decision support system. I'm sure you will learn much more in the following talks. But this system really is really designed to empower stakeholders, so from forestry, industry, politics, NGOs, and providing them with valuable insights to assess which way of forest management is advantageous, like for their respective objectives and their current but also future ecological economic conditions. So it's really it's a very innovative tool, which is grounded in a wealth of data as well, so including forest inventories, specific indicators from policy and stakeholder analysis, field study as well. And all this information is actually a prerequisite so to better prepare companies and other stakeholders for changing material and product flows across the forest wood value chain, and also creating common perspective. So for the future use of wood. Sorry. So sustainable forest management has always remained high on the EU research innovation policy agenda, with its increased funding so over the last years. To deliver on this sustainable forest management, so R&I is needed so to understand the resilience of forest in relation so to increasing extreme weather events. So understanding so the role of sustainable forest management in human health and climate change can help delivering solutions to address major megatrends such as depopulation in rural areas. So the next generation of projects, so funded under the Horizon program, so we'll certainly take stocks of the tools and methodology and insights also developed from the ONEforest project. So with respect to this final sustainable forest management of forests, so the new R&I prospect, so in the development of the Horizon work program, so 2025-2026, will also focus on enhancing so urban forests and trees for human well-being and health, as well as developing comprehensive assessments and monitoring of relationship between forest management types and biodiversity. And just a few words about the project, because it is not ending yet, since even if it's the final conference today. So the project is already well advanced and in track with its main objectives, but the final review so is foreseen so before the summer. So I look both forward so to listening to the presentation today, but also to meet you again, so the consortium, so before summer, to celebrate so your success. So thanks a lot, and I hand over the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, our project officer. And well, before entering in the details of the final results of the project, for all those that you don't know very well the ONEforest project, we have a short overview of the project given by our co-coordinator of the ONEforest, Martin Brunsmeier, from the University of Rosenheim. Please, Martin.
Thank you, Riccardo.
You're welcome.
And muchas gracias por su amable invitación a la región Castilla y León, también a Cesefor for organizing this event. And it started out perfectly, so I'm more than sure we'll have wonderful 2 days together. I think before I start, I would like to take the opportunity to briefly introduce who is sitting here and who you are looking at. So we have here Work Package 1 representative from Estonia, Christian Thal. And I would just keep it by the names, because otherwise we'll probably not keep it in time. I hope that's okay. Clemens Blattert from Work Package 2 from Switzerland. Then we have Work Package 3, Eduardo from CTFC. Work Package 4, Kai Hussmann from Germany, University of Göttingen. Work Package 5, Gwendoline Hartmann from Freiburg for forest operations and also for the topsoil cover engineering. Work Package 6, Camilla Wittmark from the SLU in Sweden. Work Package 7, Sandra Krommes, as you already know. And Work Package 8, Udo Busche from the University of Dresden in Germany for the multi-criteria decision support system, but you will hear later about that a little bit more. More close to the microphone. Sorry, I can probably get these up here. Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. Do I just? Okay. You think? Just briefly. Perfect. That looks great already. So I would like to give you a brief overview of what we are doing and what we have done actually over the last years. And as you know, before all those projects, it always starts with an idea, and in our case, more the recognition of a problem there is maybe. And as you all know, the forests are looking at more threats than ever, actually, with droughts, more insects, forest fires spreading. And at the same time, we as humans want a lot from our forests. We want them to be part of climate protection. We want all the wood supply we need for the industry. We would like to have it for recreational purposes, pure water, all that. And this makes it very difficult also to plan and also to make decisions in this world as forest managers, or also all stakeholders along the forest wood value chain. And this difficulty and this complexity, we wanted to scope a little bit in our in the project, and these are actually the objectives we have, to build a support system based on multi-criteria, to promote sustainable forestry at the one time, but at the same time to maybe give also a very reliable wood supply, having all these other forest ecosystem services for economical, social, and ecological purposes and indicators. And at the same time, we are also engineering a topsoil cover, which is helping and also supporting the growth and the seeding, actually, of plants, of trees. And this is needed more than ever, I guess, in these days. So what we came up with is the project idea of ONEforest, building this multi-criteria decision support system. As you already heard, we had this duration of 3 years. We are coming to the end of the project, so it's the final conference. We are 19 partners in 8 countries, and Sandra said it earlier, over the time, about 80 researchers were working on this project. We had a funding volume of 5.2 million, and this all went under the Horizon 2020 program. Thanks also at this point to Nicolas for supporting us during the whole time, and looking forward to meeting him again for the final review. As you see, you have various partners actually all over Europe, mostly from the scientific part, but also companies and networks supporting this project. And for this project, since the forests in Europe are rather different in many aspects, we worked in case study regions. And here on this map, you see the red dots. They are our case study regions. So one is in Catalonia, in Spain, but starting in the north also, it's you see the one in Estonia, one in 2 federal states in Germany, in Hessen and Thuringia, and one in Grisons, a canton in Switzerland. So, but it's not all about work and research in these projects. As you know, it's a lot about networking and collaboration and transferring knowledge actually between the different researchers. And I think and I just wanted to give you a few examples of these pictures, digging together in the dirt or standing in pouring rain on field trips. I think we have made all the experiences in ONEforest. And I'm sure that these collaborations and networking will extend even further than the project and help us in the future. Also, maybe for other projects, but I bet also on a personal scale, it will develop and stay as close. And as you can imagine, by so many researchers and so many partners, there was were so many results generated, and I can't possibly show them to you all. So I'm really happy that the work package leaders are here and might help me out in showing you some of those results, or at least a brief overlook of what we have done in the next part. And that's why we are already going to the next steps, actually, to the main final results. And for this, give me a second. I talked about the case study regions we have, and there you get a brief overlook of what we are talking about: forest land in the 4 different case study regions. And we highlighted the green one here for where we're working in Spain. It's not whole Catalonia, but the forest land we were researching on. And you also see the differences we have, not even in size, but also in the different main species we are researching and worked on. So I would head first to Sandra. Maybe you could tell us something about how the forest wood value chain looks like actually in the different case study regions. Could we have a microphone for that?
Thank you, Martin. So everything we brought to you now is regarding Catalonia, because we thought we are now here in Spain. We would use the case study region Spain to make it more visible, to make it more comprehensible for you. And just as Martin mentioned, we want to spend some time on the wood value chain. What is done with the wood? Because we from our side are responsible in delivering projections, what will be done with the wood in the future. It is one forest ecosystem services, and it's a very important one, not only regarding employment, but also regarding climate mitigation and so on. And at the beginning, we started with statistical data, and we used the methodology of material flow analysis to figure out what is done with the wood that is harvested. And we brought, of course, the result of the material flow analysis. It's now not very clear for you because it's a very small picture we now show to you, but we screen in this picture. And at the beginning, if you like this, it's even still very small. What you can see here is referring to the arrows. The arrows show you the amount of wood that is processed, that is harvested in the different steps of the wood value chain. Here we are at the beginning of the wood value chain. And of course, if you would go closer to that picture, you would see that more than 2/3 of the harvested wood is coming from private forest owners. This was very interesting for us. It might be obvious for you because you are already working in that region, and only 1/3 or less is coming from private-owned, company-owned forests, and that was very interesting for us. But what also was very interesting for us is that more wood or more fuel wood leaves Catalonia, the case study region, then it is imported. What means fuel wood? Means that it is processed to pellets and briquettes, but you are producing a lot of energy for other regions. That's the reason behind it, where we have a higher share of exports than imports. What we also find is that we have a lack of data. This is something which came up as we viewed on the statistical data. So we have to work with assumptions. So this is something what probably might be improved to put some more effort in the statistical data. And that what we also see is that what you are doing with the wood, how it is used for material, processing. And we see that a lot of sawn wood is produced from the higher wood quality assortments, and that you are producing poles and stakes at a high amount of harvested timber, and that the most, and that's the next slide when we are coming to the next slide, that all the pulpwood you are producing is exported from Catalonia. That it is very interesting from our perspective, because it could be a potential for further processing in that region and for further employment, for further added value, just to have that in mind. And what we also see is, of course, we have a lot of byproducts from sawmills, poles and stakes production, which are also going into the energy sector. And that's a huge amount if we are coming to the next slide, what we see in Catalonia. If you slip on that, that we have on the next one, please. Okay, we have a lot of energy, or we had a lot of wood that is processed to fuel wood, to energy wood, and this is brought to the market as pallets and briquettes that it used, and that's the status quo in Catalonia so far. And this is for us very interesting, just for the validating our model, but it also gives information to you where the different wood flows go through and how the wood is processed. And from our perspective, of course, there might be some further improvements or some ideas what could be changed in the value chain, and that's the task we would like to do with the dynamic value chain model.
Great, thank you, Sandra. And knowing about this for the forest wood value chain, I also briefly talked about the forest ecosystem services, and maybe Camilla, you could tell us what role do they play in Catalonia?
Yes, so hi everyone. Just very briefly, we're going to talk about forest ecosystem services, and in Work Package 6, we've been working with 3 different perspectives. So we were working from a policy perspective, understanding how stakeholders look into forest ecosystem services, and finally how the public reviews or considers forest ecosystem services. And as you know, there's plenty of conflicts, but there's also synergies between them. So if we start with the policy side, we can look into different areas that is from a policy perspective, which is touching upon forest in one way or the other. And those are areas of biodiversity, bioeconomy, climate change, of course, energy and forests. So those were the policy areas that we reviewed in Catalonia. And what we definitely saw that there were synergies between them, and they were mentionings across from between the different policy areas, some of them acknowledging goals from one another. So for instance, in climate change, they also acknowledge the fact that the forest needs to grow and needs to be managed. And we also realized that there were some synergies between, for instance, fire protection and climate change mitigation, adaptation. So those were issues that was acknowledged in policy. We also realized that there is plenty of conflicts between these different policies. So for instance, forest protection and economic values, biodiversity and biomass production, forest preservation and socioeconomic values. Those were mostly mentioned or acknowledged as conflicts between the different policies. And the reason why this is important is also to understand how policy reviews the use of the forest from all the different perspectives the forest functions, from an economic, from an ecologic, and from a social perspective.
Thank you, Camilla. And so then probably we talk about the stakeholders and how they look at it.
Mm-hmm. So we did have interviews in Catalonia. We had 8 stakeholders from various perspectives of the forest. So they were all representing either the economic, the ecologic, or the social perspective of using the forest. And in this spiderweb illustration, in the middle you have few answers, and in the outer circles you have many answers. And what you can see from the green line, the most important forest ecosystem services that the stakeholders mention, clean air and water stands out, pollination and biodiversity, protection and climate are the ones who are mentioned, most frequently mentioned as being very important. On the other side, on the orange illustration, we see that fuel wood, timber production, and hunting, recreational values, beautiful scenery are not acknowledged as very important by the stakeholders in Catalonia.
And what about the public? I mean, they are probably the largest in number.
Indeed, the public are the biggest group of people who are interested in the forest. They agree with the stakeholders. They also mention clean air and water, as you see in the middle of this chart, saying that this is a very important forest ecosystem service. And I should have also mentioned that this was reviewed by a survey that we sent out to 2,000 people in Catalonia. So there's a big number of public who answered this question. We also see that beautiful scenery is quite important. Climate change and carbon storage is, of course, also mentioned. Pollination and habitat for wildlife is also mentioned. But public recreation is, if you compare to the stakeholders, more important to the public. Not very surprising, but it's good to have these numbers in place to understand how the public think about forest ecosystem services.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And so where does this all lead to in the end?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So why is this important then? Well, we wanted to understand all the three perspectives, from the policy, from the stakeholders, and from the public. And what we can find with this is that we do have conflicts or potential conflicts between what the public would like to see, what the stakeholders would like to see, and what the policy acknowledges. We see that in all three groups, we acknowledge the climate change. We also acknowledge clean air and water, which was really standing out and a little bit surprising to us, specifically that the public knew about this and also acknowledged this as an important forest ecosystem services. And the risk with having conflicts between these groups is that it might affect the ability of using the forest for the way you want it. It might affect your well-being as a public person if you're not allowed or possible to do your recreational use of the forest, for instance. And it might also affect the stakeholders if they can't pursue business as they would like. So those conflicts are quite important to acknowledge.
Mm-hmm. And one last question to that. So what's up in the future? So where does this go?
Yes, where does this go? Well, this goes to 4 different scenarios, actually. So what we did was, and I will talk a little bit more about it when we go on the poster tour, we looked into different pathways. So you will read this as on one scale, you see the high or low demand of biomass for forests. And on the other scale, you see how strong is the political decision-making support or the institutions, and how well is this forest use regulated. And from this, we combined a number of questions from the stakeholders. So this is actually something that we developed together with the stakeholders in Catalonia. The first scenario is a society under a voluntary green transition, and that can be reviewed as the business as usual scenario. And I believe we have another slide, don't we? Yeah, there, thank you. So if we look into the visions of the stakeholders, we see in the first scenario where we have low demand of biomass and a rather weak political decision-making or institutions. We want to balance the different values of economic and ecologic values and support climate change. If we move toward my right, the second one, climate change adaptation and green transition. This is where stakeholders see a sustainable society, bioeconomy is developing as the green transition is going on, and we're also using the forest to emphasize climate change adaptation. In the third scenario, where we move up toward a more stronger political decision-making, we see a stronger protection of forests to promote different ecosystem services like recreation and clean air and water. So then we're acknowledging these aspects that the stakeholders have put forward. And in the fourth final scenario, where we have a lower demand for bio-based materials from the forest, but still have a strong political decision. This is the most utopic scenario, if I put it like that, where here we have a very strong protection of forest, which will affect the biomass production and also emphasizing carbon storage. So all of these four are talking about climate change, since this is one of the big issues on the agenda. If we continue to look at the scenarios on the next slide, we will see that, there we go. We will look into how the wood value chain would differ between these different scenarios. So coming again to the first one, we will have a rather stable supply of timber or woody biomass, and the demand will increase a little bit, particularly for wood fuel, but still keep on a rather low level. And the industry will stay rather traditional. Not so much new will happen, so there will not be big innovations in this. In the second scenario, where we still have a weaker political decision-making, but we have a higher demand for timber, we see that industry needs more timber, so we need to have longer transportation of biomass. And the technological development, the digitalization will promote this. However, it will still be a challenge given that we will have long distances for moving timber. In the third one, we have somewhat, even though it's still high demand, it's a little bit declining. We do have a transport system that is developing and maintaining supply, but local industries are suffering from the fact that we need to protect more forest, and we cannot have as high demand or supply as we would like. But still, there will be some new segments developing, like biorefinery, for instance. And in the final fourth scenario, we see that the demand will grow moderately. There will be much more protection of forest land, which particularly for climate change mitigation adaptation. And in existing industries will continue to develop, and they will improve their capacity with technological development. So even though the need for timber will be rather high, they can survive, if I put it like that, with a smaller amount of timber in total.
Thanks. Thank you very much. And I would like to move forward a little bit to how we really got to the decision support system, in short, MCDSS, and the value chain model, just to show you a brief overview of what we have done and how this interacts actually. If you look here on the left side, we would like to have all the stakeholders or users input. So what do they actually want? What decision do they need, or what support do they need? Is it more for timber, more for recreation? Do they want more on biodiversity parts? And this leads in, and we hear more about that later from Udo, into this decision support system, where the basis are the forest growth models. And this again leads to the value chain model from the wood assortments, where we can see how the actions are and the effects are on the industry. And these scenarios, which we just heard, are more like an overriding aspect to this. So, Kai, I would like to get to you, and could you introduce us a little bit about the way on how you collected and generated the data in ONEforest?
Yeah, hi. I would be glad to do that. Thank you very much. I'm here on behalf of all my colleagues from the work package 1 to 4, whom I want to thank very much for their great contributions. I will show you here a brief overview of the data generating process. This is the data flow project that we have been harmonizing to be made in each case data region separately. Each separate case study regions had some geodata and some NFI data. And the first challenge was then to find a biogeographic region that is best representative for this case study region. After that, we all collected NFA data and made some representative stands out of it. And these representative stands were then simulated to the year 2020, such that we all have the same starting year. And with this, so to say, already simulated or pre-simulated starting year, we were then developing different management options. I regarded them as options to not confuse them with the scenarios. We came up with typical management options for that regions, and of course, each management options then led to different development of these representative stands. And we were then interested in how the indicators that we developed during the process, which are representative for the forest ecosystem services, or or the respective attributes of the forests, and to integrate also some uncertainties regarding climate. We also integrated the RCP scenarios, these three RCP scenarios there, but we did not include them directly. This is why we have two arrows here into the simulations, because the simulators were so different that this was actually simply not doable, but we integrated them in the uncertainties of the indicators, such that we have a corridor for the indicators and not only estimates, which is, so to say, for their expression without uncertainties. Having that, we investigated some indicators directly, but of course our main task was to deliver them into this MCDSS that we do learn more about by Udo in some minutes. And within the MCDSS, Udo will be more specific there, we can, so to say, build scenarios and landscapes and define our own region. And this own region is composed of these management options we were developing in our management options. So this MCDSS, you are, so to say, available to make your own region, but the settings you do there is based on the simulations we were doing. And when we go to the next slide, please, there we see representative some of the indicators. As I said, we try to make use of the forest ecosystem services and functions that were developed during the program, and we translated them, so to say, more generally into indicators. And after a very, very long harmonization process, we agreed on common calculation methods within the case study regions so that these results are comparable. I will be much more specific on that on my presentation tomorrow, which will be take half an hour there. I will go more deeper into the calculation, also into the results. On the next slide, we see exemplary for one case study region for one representative stand, which is in the continental forest located at development. This is how one exemplary simulation looks like, just to give you an idea of how we've been working. On the left, for example, we see an indicator that is representative for diameter viability, for structural diversity, so to say. We see that the management options, which are the typical ones that have been developed with forest practitioners, differs here during the simulation. We see, especially in the year 2050, that there is some that there's some evident differentiation between these management options. Also, we, of course, which we see here on the right picture, have some which do not really distinguish between this time horizon of 40 years. In the next slide, we then see how two indicators develop here. I chose an example for its synergy. We see here now that the indicator of large trees, which is a natural conservation indicator, has some synergy with the standard error of deviation. So at least in this picture here and in this case study regions located in Catalonia, we see some synergy. And on the next slide, we see some trade-off. This is just, for me, a chosen example where there's a very open, very strict relationship, linear relationship between the Shannon index, which is, of course, also for structural diversity, and the large trees. And we see here that even within groups of indicators that, so to say, aim on the same service, so we see some trade-off and obstacles, and this is now my explanation why we need the make use of optimization methods, because even when we consider two simple indicators, we can follow that that is too complicated, or that the help of optimization methods helps to objectifying this process.
Thank you, Kai. So great. So we learned that there is a high complexity about the indicators and between the indicators and the objectives. And maybe Udo, you could help us understand the method you use to cope with this complexity in the next steps.
Yes, I think I will do that with pleasure. And yes, I would like to give you a short overview of our multi-criteria decision support system, only an overview of the concept. At the beginning, we divide our case study region, and we divide this region into different cells. Yes, you see here different cells, and they have a specific area, and now we have to characterize these cells, right? Because there are different formations of trees within these cells. And also already introduced by Kai, we call this formation of trees, we call this formation stands, initial stands, right? And we see these stands are characterized by different species of trees. And what we are doing to characterize the starting situation, that means we assign a lot of different, or one specific of these stands to one specific cell here. Yes, that's the situation at hand. And then we come up, and already Kai mentioned these, we have options for actions, and we call these options management options, right? And here we agreed with the work package 1 to 4 about 4 management options. Yes, you see here A, low intensity, B, business as usual, and so on. And then now work package 1 to 4, we use the simulation models, yes, and we apply now these management options, not we, work package 1 to 4, yes, and see if we apply such a management option to one specific stand, then what are the results with respect to the different indicators? Yes, that means the calculations from work package 1 to 4 serve as an input for our multi-criteria decision support system. What we are doing then, and what is the objective of our multi-criteria decision support system, is that we now choose the best management option in order to meet the objectives of the different stakeholders in the best possible way. That means finally we assign management options to individual cells. Maybe we can go to the next slide. And now with this slide is also the concept of the multi-criteria decision support system, but more from the perspective of the user, of the stakeholder. Yes, we use here the user, yes, and have here the input of the user. At the beginning, we have to define the different cells, as I mentioned before on the slide before. Then maybe it's possible to, yes, group the different cells, yes, to put them into one group, yes, and then for these groups, but it's not necessary to have such groups, then we define individual objects, yes, for these cells. Okay, that's what the user has to do. And then our model comes into play. And what we are doing here with the model is we merge the different individual objects into one objective function. There's a weighted sum approach. Yes. And then, yes, we will solve finally our model. And the model is nothing different than a mathematical model. Okay, next slide, please. Oh,
That's
no.
already it.
That's it so far?
That's it. And I think you're having the results in a few minutes.
Okay, fine.
Right?
Then I will present that. That's fine with me.
Sorry, you have to stop here now.
That's okay.
No, that's good. Because now Sandra is actually taking over and explaining the next steps in the value chain model. So just the methodology, and we'll come to the final results in the next chapter.
Okay, then we go to the next slide.
Yes.
Okay, what you see here is a what we have done so far with the dynamic value chain model, we tried to put in the whole value chains, the different value chains we have in the different regions. So we have the material use, which is the processing of sawnwood, poles and stakes, for example. We have then the panel production, which is not in place in all case study regions, but we built the model and the case in the modeling that you can activate it for any case study region so that we have it in the background. There we find MDF, particle board production, for example. Then we have the pulp production, different pulps. And at the end, we have also a model for the fuel wood processing to bring up pallets and briquettes. And that is what we have modeled. And that means the results which are coming from Udo and the different work packages from the simulations are fed into our dynamic value chain model. And based on the different assortments and the volumes we get, we will fed them into the different wood value chains. And then we process the products virtually over the time period up to 2060. And what we consider is that we really try to implement CSR-specific values. What does it mean? We have a so-called greenfield approach. That means we are building up the processing and the production of each value chain as a greenfield, as a factory which is not on a brownfield, but which is just a new investment with a certain capacity. But what we then fed in is specific values like wages, like the CO2 impact, for example, of the grid. We fed into this model cost numbers regarding what is the price of the grounds and so on, in order to consider specific values of the case study regions. And this allows us to simulate the socioeconomic impacts of the wood processing and also the environmental impacts. And this is then based on the input we got from the material, from the MCDSS. That means we got the volumes, we got the assortments of the different harvested timber. Mm-hmm. Yes, and what you see over here is the methodology behind it. Probably you might know it. It's this called System Dynamics. It was getting famous from the world model. This is coming up from the Club of Rome in the 1960s. And they were simulating the behavior of the world. If we have an increase in population, how does this affect our consumption of resources? What does it mean for the population? And this approach is still in place and is very famous. And we used that approach to simulate the behavior of the wood value chain in the different case study regions. But that's not the only thing. We also put in results of life cycle assessment in order to show the environmental impact. That means for every wood processing, we did a life cycle assessment and we include dynamic values. What would that mean? For example, we know that we have in different European states the change of the power generation. And this is one crucial element if we look at the environmental impacts, that the power generation will change in the future. And there we have the advantage that the European Commission brought up a new study with respect to the Green Deal, where they projected the power generation or the energy generation in the different European states. And we used that information and included that into our life cycle assessment. And these data were fed into the model as a background so that we know what is the environmental impact of a certain processing in the future. What we also did is that we use social life cycle assessment to come up with social indicators. But as we had a look at the different indicators, we had to recognize that not all social indicators work for our wood value chain. So we had to decide to choose a few one. And for example, one could be a very simple one, which is the sum of the wages, which is given to the employees in order to show the social impact. But there might be also others which are in the model.
Thank you. But then we would like to turn to the results, and just to get you this picture actually back in mind, what we just heard about the methodology on what is the MCDSS and how it feeds up into the value chain model and how they work together. Now actually, Udo, you are allowed to talk a little bit more about what you found out and let us know what you have.
Okay, now it's better. Okay, now we have two approaches for our multi-criteria decision support system. And one, yes, we refer to the different scenarios. Yes, we see here for the 4 different scenarios, which are already introduced by Camilla. And the problem is if we have a description of the different scenarios, yes, to use this description now to put this into a mathematical model, right? And that means, okay, we need a transition of this scenario into a mathematical model. And how we do that is we're doing that by finding out some weights for our different indicators. Yes. You see here on the left-hand side, you see a different number of indicators. And now here on the upper part of this table, we see, okay, the different 4 scenarios. Yes, and for each single scenario, now we at the group have to decide, or especially work package 6 and work package 7, yes, they have decided, okay, what is the best weight for one specific indicator? And we see that the weights vary between the different scenarios. For example, if you're looking here at the harvested timber in total, we see, for example, in scenario 1, we have a very high weight of 50, right? We have around about 100 points here, as you see, and that means, okay, that is a very important indicator for scenario 1. Yes, it's also important for scenario 2, but it's less important for scenario 3 and so on. And we do such assignment of weights to different indicators so that we can characterize one specific scenario with the help of these different weights. Yes, and then this information is used. The weights are input for our mathematical model, right? We use this, and then we solve the model, and then we receive our result. And on the left-hand side, you see here, that's a log from our mathematical model. Yes, it's maybe difficult to read for the user, right? And therefore, I think we have to prepare these results in a more graphical way. And yes, we decided for a radar chart here. Yes, and you see here on the outer edge of these radar charts, we see the different indicators. Yes, and even for those indicators which has a weight of 0, right, they are also put into this radar chart because we can calculate also for these indicators the result, right? And you see here with the radar chart, okay, if we have emphasized one specific indicator, then of course the mathematical model tries, yes, to fulfill this indicator in a very good way. And then we see, okay, then because often we have conflicts between different indicators, then maybe the fulfillment of another indicator is not as high as for the other indicator with a high weight. Yes, and now we apply that to the case study region here in Spain. And thank you very much for Eduardo for the calculations. And you see here on the right-hand side our results in hopefully nice way, right? Because we have used 2,700 different cells. Okay, we have to assign our 4 management options, right, to these 207 cells, right? And yes, here we see the distribution, and we have here the assignment of the different management options. We have done that with different colors, right? That means here, for example, the red dots are management option D. Yes, and you see here in this nice figure, yes, we see in this different cells, we apply the red one. That means, okay, this management option D, and the blue one is B, and so on. And we see here the distribution of the different management option for the different cells. And this is according to scenario 3. And minutes later, I have the possibility to show you also some 4 other pictures for the other scenarios. Okay, thank you so far.
That's great. Thank you, Udo. Well, I would like to head over to Gwendolyn, because forest operations also take a vital role in this place in the project. So what do you think, Gwendolyn, are the perspectives of forest operations in here?
Yeah, the perspectives are quite different. So yeah, we worked in our work package next to the MCDSS and the DVCM on developing a hydrogel and topsoil cover to support planting during dry seasons. This hydrogel or topsoil cover is based on wood fibers and xanthan gum or gelatine, which are also materials used in the food industry. So these hydrogel are fully biodegradable and yeah, so very comfy for the soil and the plants. During this time, we did very much different trials to study the biomass allocation, vegetative status of the plants, the degradability, water storing capacity, the time consumption during application, the application itself, and many other things regarding the soil and the microbiomes in the soil. Next part of our work package, next to the revitalization of forest, is the perspectives of the forest. And for this, we worked on risk maps and practical guidelines for preparation against disturbances for all the case studies. And these guidelines and risk maps focus on drought, fire, and wind. And also a big part of our work was the calculation of a best harvesting method to reduce like CO2 emissions or jobs, or yeah, it's not to reduce the jobs, but we all know that the workforce is very hard to find. So we also want to use a method where we don't use or where we don't need all or a lot of people. Yeah, and of course, for this we used, we did these calculations for the forests we have now and also for the future forest, and therefore we used the modeled scenarios from WIPI 1 to 4.
Thank you very much. That's great. Before we move on with the value chain model, I pointed out to Riccardo that we need 3 more minutes. Okay, thank you. So then I would say, Sandra, you can, I think that's, oh, sorry, is it Sandra?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
So you might be interested how the results of Udo has presented from the Radasha now are processed in a dynamic value chain model. And this leads me first to the different scenarios, because I mentioned before that, of course, we have this overriding scenarios. That means we would like to also simulate the change in the case study regions and to consider the different opinions of the stakeholders. And that's the reason why we did the scenarios. And the outcome of the scenarios was also how the wood value chain will change in the future. Of course, these are projections, scenarios that are ideas of the stakeholders, how it could be. And we put them together as scenarios. And in the scenario we had a look at Udo, they were projecting a decreasing wood value chain. That means that there will be less engagement. There will be other scenarios where we have new investments, where we have an increase in wood value chain. But referring to that scenario 3, we have chosen here as an example, we have a decrease in the wood value chain. That means that less wood products are demanded. And the results now from Udo are fed into the dynamic value chain model, and that is presented on the next slides. It's a kind of results that can be used from the stakeholders to see if they prioritize certain indicators, which impact will this then have to the wood value chain. So we would can give an answer how the wood is processed. Will there be enough wood in the market if the stakeholder prioritize high CO2 storage, high harvested timber, and so on? And what you see here in the first slide is, of course, we will have even enough wood supplied in the market. That might be a good feedback if the stakeholders would go for that scenario. And on the other hand, we see here another impact on the second picture, which show the value added in the different wood value chain. As mentioned before, we have different processing industries in Catalonia. It's the saw wood industry, it's the poles and stakes, and it's the fuel wood industry. And that we see how much wood is processed in the different industries that we see in the picture in the middle. And a little bit provocative is the right table. We made the quotient value added versus emitted CO2 equivalents. That means how many value is added by emitting 1 kilogram of CO2. And what you see here, of course, is that you have a higher value added when you are producing sawnwood than producing fuel wood. But of course, you can't use fuel wood to produce sawnwood. That is reasonable as well. But it just should give the stakeholder a kind of an overview how much value can be generated by different processes. And of course, it is a little bit provocative from our side to show such an indicator. But that are the results we would like to give to the stakeholders so that they can get a kind of a feeling how their weighting of the different indicators in the forest will impact the wood value chain.
Thank you. So concluding, and it's less in conclusion than just to point out again and what is the output of ONEforest actually. It's the decision support system which we are building, and in combination with the value chain model for the industry. We will have a huge data pool also for work packages 1 to 4 with all the simulations going on, and we are working on policy recommendations, of course, as a result from these decision support, and an engineered topsoil cover, as Gwendoline also pointed out. And I think at this point, I would like to thank you all for the answers you have given me so far and supported in that way. And also, you're welcome for all the posters and the presentations tomorrow, I think, where everyone goes in more detail into each work packages. And then I think I can hand over to Riccardo again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's pointer. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys. Very well done. It was huge work, and we can see excellent results. First, I would like to say that we missed a work package leader. Of course, it wasn't a mistake, but I would like to also thank you, Raquel Castan, who is on behalf of Cesefor Foundation. She's the work package leader for communication and dissemination. So, Raquel, this clap is for you. And actually, she was working because she was retransmitting the content on Twitter. And second, I would like to thank also the people who are following the conference online, and remember to them that they can participate by asking questions using the chat. And now we have the question and answer time. The floor is yours. We have basically 25 minutes. Yes. We still have the presentation from the specific one. Okay, so sorry, I was I was mistaken because you already presented a little bit the multi-criteria decision support system. But Udo, please, you can use your 15 minutes. Please, please take this. This is the pointer and sliding.
Okay, now I have to handle two things here simultaneously. I don't know. Okay.
No, because you were mixing a little bit.
It's fine. Thank you, of course. Okay. Yes, thank you for the opportunity, yes, to explain a little bit more in more detail the multi-criteria decision support system. Yes, here we see the outline. I will doing here the recap very short because I have already explained here the concept of our system. Then I will go a little bit into the mathematical model. It's not really math, but I would want to give you an impression how we work, right? And when I'm talking about we, that's my team, right? Or our team that is also with Maria Beranek and Michael Hölscher. And when I'm talking about we, that's not only me, that's our team from TU Dresden. Yes, and then we will apply our mathematical model to the case study region here in Spain, right? And finally, some results. Okay, what is the rough idea? Because yes, we want to develop such a multi-criteria decision support system for the stakeholders. And the stakeholders, they have different objectives, right? They have different interests, different preferences. Yes, and yes, as I told you, we try to find an optimal assignment of management options. And what is interesting for us, I'm from business and economics faculty, right? And then here we are talking about a planning horizon of 40 years. That is very typical for forest, of course, right? But for in business, that's a pretty long time, right? Okay, we have the preferences and the requirements, and as I told you at the beginning, yes, we integrate simulation from work package 1 to 4 into our model. And yes, we apply that to the different case study regions in Estonia, Switzerland, Spain, and in Germany. Okay, I skipped this because I have explained this figure already. And you see here again the different indicators. And the different indicators will serve as objectives for our stakeholders, right? And that means, okay, we follow these indicator lists, and normally these indicators are the objectives of our model. Okay, and now I will give you some small insights in our mathematical model. Yes, and more or less, our decision support system is nothing different than a mixed integer linear program. Okay, that is, yes. And if that is a linear program, then we can solve such problems very easily. Yes, with the help of, we call this solvers. Yes, and solvers, we have a mathematical model. Yes, and then we put that into a solver, and there are different solvers. Of course, on the one hand, we have commercial solvers. They are very fast, but they have a disadvantage because we have to pay for them, right? And therefore, we can also use some open source solvers, and that's maybe interesting for our EU project, right? And everybody can use these solvers, and therefore, we use here LP-Solve for our model so that everybody can use this multi-criteria decision support system. But sometimes, if the problems become large, then we have a problem, because sometimes the problems are huge, and then it's very, very difficult to find a really optimal solution. And that means, okay, we have to go and to find a heuristic solution. That means, okay, we've tried to find a good solution in a short time, but it's not necessarily an optimal solution, but nevertheless, often a very good solution. Right? And of course, if we see here two extreme points, a heuristic solution and an exact solution, and of course, it's possible from a mathematical point, it's interesting to combine both methods, right? Or different methods from heuristics and exact approaches. Okay, but here we have a multi-criteria decision support system. That it means, okay, we have not only one objective function, we have different objectives, a lot of different objectives. Yes, you saw the list of indicators, 17 indicators. Yeah, that means, okay, we have to merge these different objectives into one objective function. And you see here, it's only representation, yes, of an objective function. We see here alpha, beta, gamma, and so on for the different indicators. And these are the weights. That means, okay, we have to determine for our model. Yes, and then maybe one part of this common objective function is more important, this part of the objective function, than the other one. Yes, and it depends on the different weights. We have a lot of restriction to consider and so on. And you see here on the right-hand side, yes, we have to balance all the different objectives, yes, and to find an hopefully very good solution for the stakeholders and for the interests of the stakeholder. And to give you an idea, and we have here now a simplified figure, yes, if we make it a little bit simpler and only consider two different objective functions, yes, and because then we can do that graphically, yes, we maybe here consider only two objective functions. Yes, we have one objective function, y1 and y2, and we see for this objective function the lower level and an upper bound here, and the same is true for the second one. Yes, and in the ideal world, it would be nice, yes, if we can reach for both objectives, yes, the upper level. But often that's not possible because we have conflicting objectives, right? And therefore, okay, we have a trade-off between the different objectives. And if we want to fully have here to realize the upper bound of one objective, yes, then it's very bad, and we can realize only the lower level of the other objective, and so on. And you see here different points on this so-called Pareto front, right? And then we have to decide for one specific option because there are conflicts between the different objectives. And now here are only two, but we consider a lot of more indicators and objectives, right? And that's, of course, that's why we need a mathematical model, yes, to balance all the different individual objectives. Okay, yes, and now we're looking at the decision maker. Yes, at the decision maker, then we have one possibility, then he has maybe no preferences, yes, and then that means, okay, he is indifferent because this point is as good for him as the other one, and so on. But if he is able to formulate his preferences, yes, then we are able to select one specific optimal point directly for him. But we need the preferences of this decision maker. Okay, yes, we see here, yes, and that's only for our simple example. Yes, if we have different weights, yes, maybe here alpha is 0, beta is 1. That means, okay, the first objective function is not relevant or not so important for him, and he emphasizes the second objective function. Yes, then he will realize this point. And if we said, okay, both are equally important, then we will choose or select this point and so on, right? And that means, okay, with the help of the weights, we are able to calculate a specific solution for our decision maker. Okay, yes, now we want to impress you a little bit with here some signs, yes, because now we have the different indicators here, and then we formulate that into a, yes, it's not very difficult because normally that is here a linear restriction. That's not a problem. We have our decision variable. This one here, that's only a variable which can take on value 0 or 1. Yes, and then we have the indicator data. That's the input from our simulation model here. Yes, we will use this information from the simulation models, and here we see the cell size. Okay, that's very easy. Because at the beginning, I think Kai also mentioned here the Shannon index, and then it becomes a little bit more complicated because then if we want to realize such an indicator, it's a nonlinear one, and that's not nice for our mathematical, yes, because if we have nonlinear things, then it's much difficult here to solve the problem to optimality, and therefore there's one trick. Yes, we try to approximate this nonlinear function with the help of a linear one. right? And that's the trick we are doing, and that's possible, yes, but it costs a little bit. Costs mean, okay, yes, we have here one additional restriction. That means, okay, we want to find all the area shares that they are mostly almost equal to each other. And then, yes, we formulate that with the help of it's very similar to a goal programming approach. That means, okay, we want to minimize the deviation from our target value, right? That means, okay, we have an higher value and lower value, and that means, okay, we try to minimize that, and then, but at the cost of some additional restriction. I think that's not so important here, but I want only to tell you, okay, if we integrate complicated nonlinear restrictions, it becomes more complicated for the model, yes, and to find a way to integrate that into the mathematical model. Okay, yes. I told you already, yes, we have here the most important one is the selection, the assignment variable from the management option to one specific cell. Yeah, that's the most important decision. But our model is, we can use our model in different ways. That means, okay, we have on the one hand, we have a free optimization. That means, okay, yes, I give the weights into the model, and then we find a solution. But it's also possible to apply a goal programming approach. If you, as a decision maker, has a clear preferences and know I want to have one specific value for one specific objective function, yes, then you can put that into our model, yes, and then the model tries to exactly meet this value. Tries, yes, but sometimes it's not possible, but we try to minimize the deviation from this specific value, right? That is the idea. And that is possible, yes, so that means, okay, we can use this model also as a goal programming approach. And if you want to integrate an additional restriction that you say, okay, I want to have a specific harvested timber amount, yeah, then you can say, okay, then we have put in an additional hard restriction. It's also possible to say that. And the model helps you a little bit by this, because at the beginning we tell you, okay, there's only a specific range in which you can, from which you can choose your concrete value. Because if you have an absurd high value, then of course, then we will not find a solution, right? That means, okay, the model helps you a little bit, yes, finding the right value because is within a specific range. Okay. That's it from the mathematical model, only to give you a rough idea, right? And now we apply this model to the case study region. Yes, and yes, for our example here in Spain for Catalonia, yes, we see we have here 18 representative stands. That is, we have 18 different formation of trees. Yes, you remember maybe the first slide, right? And yes, we have a species code here. We have the site quality index and the stand age. Yes, you see here 3, 3, 2. And if we multiply that, then we have 18 different stands, right? And now, yes, the idea is now we have to assign the stands to specific cells. That is already done by our partners, right? And now we have nearly 2,700 different cells. That means, okay, we have to assign now our 4 management options. Yes, you remember the 4 different management options here, and we have to assign 4 different management options, one of these to each single cell here. Yes, that's our task and what the model can deliver. Now you see here some screenshots from our model. Yes, and you see here on the left-hand side, you see the different stands, and they are characterized by different species. Yes, it's very difficult, but yes, I'm not from forest. Yes, we have a lot of different ones, but we have these cells are characterized mainly by one specific. That's a huge amount of. There's one type of tree which is dominated. Okay, and then we have to characterize the 2,700 cells, thanks to Eduardo, right? Yes, we have here a lot of different cells, and we have here the cell size. Yes, that's okay, the size of the different cells. And yes, we have assigned the different stands to these cells. Okay, yes, and now we have the different scenarios. Yes, Camilla has already introduced the different scenarios here, the 4 scenarios, and you already know here the different weights, yes, for the different scenarios. And now we picked up one specific scenario, the scenario 3, and yes, we will apply this scenario now to our case study region. Okay, now for the user now must tell our program the preferences, right? That means, okay, we have to put in the weights into this model here. Yes, and yes, you see, okay, for the one example, yes, you see here the harvested timber, for example, yes, then the corresponding weight. Yes, you can choose between 1 and 100, 0 and 100. And then we put in here for scenario 1, for example, we put in the number 50. And for all the other indicators, we put in also the different weights into the model. That's necessary. And then we end up in this objective function here, but it's done automatically. Yes, for the user, you only have to put in a number here in a cell for one specific indicator. I think that's not so difficult, right? If you have 17 or 18 indicators, then you have to put in 18 values into these cells here. Okay, then we push the button and say, please solve the model. And then we have to wait depending on the size of the problem. Here we have 2,700 cells. It's a pretty large problem, right? And then we have to wait 1 minute or something like that. It depends on the restrictions, right? I talk about the nonlinear restrictions and so on. It depends a little bit. Commercial solvers are much faster. The open source solver is a little bit slower, but then we end up with some results. Yes, and at the beginning, I show you here the log list. Yes, that is a detailed numbered output. You can read that. Yes, and you have here the values of all individual indicators and also the value range. I told you at the beginning, okay, we selected one specific value for the indicator, but also we see, okay, what is the possible range? And then we can see, okay, what is a concrete value for one specific indicator? Yes, and of course, our solution, okay, the assignment of management options to individual cells. Okay, and that is the output, yes, to do that graphically. Yes, you already know here that is a radar chart. And as I said, at the outer edge of this radar chart, we see here the different indicators. Yes, and in bold, here we see sometimes some are in bold. For those indicators, we have assigned a concrete weight that is larger than 0, right? That means, okay, we emphasize these indicators. But of course, we can calculate also for the others in non-bold here letters, normal letters, we see, okay, what is the result for these indicators also, right? Because here you see, okay, the weight was 0, but to a certain extent, also this indicator is or objective is fulfilled, right? And that means, okay, now if we apply different scenarios to our case study region here in Catalonia, yes, we will end up with a different solution, yes? And we can see that here with the different radar chart on the one hand, and here, and for this we need, of course, right, it's only possible for the regions, for our four regions. We see here, if we choose for scenario 1, and you remember that was maybe, okay, harvested timber is important, then we see we have a large number of red management options here assigned to the specific cells, and you see that here on the right lower corner, yes, you see here, this management option D, yes, is the most important one for scenario 1. And we see the distribution, and there is no option A. And sometimes we have only a little bit C and a little bit of D. Yes, and now if we change the weights, yes, and here in our case, we have the weights for the different individual scenarios, yes, then we will see, okay, we end up with a different, of course, with a different solution, yes, and you see here, again, the radar chart. Now we see here, for example, the number of large trees, yes, in the previous scenario, we have a high number, here see a not so high number, yes, and that here, yes, the different values for the different indicators. And of course, we see pretty much different assignment of management options to the different cells. Now we see the blue dots, yes, are dominating the other ones. And yes, now we can apply that to scenario 3. That was at the beginning, I showed you this figure. Yes, distribution of the different management options. Yes, and finally, scenario 4. And that's how our model works. And I think, well, hopefully you have a rough idea what we have done with the multi-criteria decision support system. And again, right, that's nice for an EU project, right, that we can collaborate. And that means, okay, we take the input of work package 1 to 4. The simulation is absolutely necessary because without the simulation, we can't do that here, right? And of course, there's with work package 6 and 7, yeah, they have agreed upon the different scenarios, and we have translated these scenarios into the weights so that we have an available, have them available for our mathematical model. Final conclusion, last slide here. Yes, hopefully, yes, the MCDS helps stakeholders make informed number-based decisions, right? Depending on their own preferences. Yes, we have integrated the simulation data from the different case study regions, and then we have applied a mathematical model with a weighted sum approach here. It's only a suggestion. Yes, it's only a suggestion. Maybe we can, it is maybe a starting point also for a discussion. Yes, because maybe the different stakeholders can discuss and they can agree upon, yes, perfectly fitting weighting, yes, of the different indicators. And I have to remember you, yes, there's not only one solution. Yes, because this solution depends on the individual preferences of the stakeholders. That is maybe more, yes, bottom up, or if you're looking from the scenarios, then we have the top down, yes. But in both cases, yes, we have to define the different weights. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Well, we have 5 minutes. If you have a question, maybe a couple of questions, we can take it right now. If it is an urgency, because, you know, we thought about the poster sessions as a time for networking and for making questions with a certain time to have answers. And so if there are not urgencies, we can, yes, there is an urgency, of course. Please, Pablo. At least my boss, I can say no. I cannot say no, of course.
Hi, thank you very much. Just for a clarification or to take an idea, how is it possible to replicate this in other regions? Is it easy, or how much effort can it take?
Yes, I think it takes some work, right? We can apply that to other regions, of course, but as I told you at the beginning, we need the input of the work packages 1 to 4. That means, okay, that is nothing if we do not have the input of the work package 1 to 4, the simulation models, the forest experts, right? They have to agree upon the different management options, and they have to put them into the specific region. That means, okay, we need the knowledge from the region. What are the cells? We have to define the cells. Yes, and then we need the forest experts. They have to simulate, right? Because they have to say, okay, what if I apply one specific management option to this cell, to this stand? Yes, what are the indicators? And we need that input. That means it's not so easy, right? It would be nice, of course, right? But we need the input, and therefore we have done the collaboration, and for future work for other regions, it would be also necessary that there is the input data at the beginning from the forest experts from Switzerland, Germany, Estonia, Spain, of course, Catalonia, right? And then we need the experts, but they can do this work also for other regions, right? But that's necessary.
Thank you. One last question, please. Raquel, can you help, please? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Thomas. I'm affiliated to the Bavarian Research Alliance in Munich, Germany. My question is also with regard to how to create the future based upon this kind of results. As everyone knows here, European research and innovation projects are producing a lot of times good results, good outcomes, and everyone is happy for meeting for such a final conference. But for me, it would be also of interest, what is, for example, here in the case of Valladolid, the interest of a certain region, how to make use out of the results. Wouldn't it be good to talk about also creating synergies? If a region is interested, it must be put money to a pot for making use of the results. It's not only about having an open access with regard to those data or these data. It also has to do with a kind of training of the experts on a regional scale for making use of your model. It's not only easy to be explained. And this is my question. Do the region have an interest in taking over the results in the case of Valladolid?
Thank
It
you.
has to do with money.
I'm also have a question from the online audience, maybe connected to this one. The multi-criteria decision support system developed in the project will be made available for any user.
Yes, of course we can. That's open source. Yes, you can use this model. But as we mentioned, and the first question was very important. It's also related to your question, right? We need the input data. That means, okay, for the 4 case study regions, right? We can directly apply this model, and also for individual cells. It's not necessary that we all use all of these 2,700 different cells. We can select also maybe 500, maybe, or for one forest owner, he can select, I don't know, 12, I don't know, private forest owner, he can apply that. That's easy, but only for the 4 case study region. That was a question at the beginning. Yes, if we want to apply that, we need the collaboration from the forest experts, and then we can apply that. It's only an input, right? It's nice for us because we are the software developers, right? Then we can use that, and hopefully we can interpret the results. Of course, it's important, but it's not that easy, right, to directly use the results. For the case study region, yes, and we are happy to share our program. That's not a problem, and you can solve the problems also with the help of the open source solver. Yes, and I told you at the beginning, okay, the larger the problem, the longer the running times, but that is available. I think that's not a clear yes, not a clear no. It's mixed answer, I guess.
Thanks a lot. For me, it is clear. Kai, please.
Thank you. Can I add maybe something from view of the work packages 1 to 4? I think all 3 questions very much deal with the problem of extrapolation. I think that a specialist from forestry is able to extrapolate results. Of course, we specifically defined them for the case study regions, but they are firmly integrated into this model. And when I can only say this, of course, for Germany, you can extrapolate them, for example, easily to Bavaria, not so good to Lower Saxony, which are quite different federal states. But if you as a forest specialist feel that extrapolation is possible, and you can, of course, do your own landscape. The landscape, which is defined into the model, is not associated, so to say, specifically, explicitly, regionally to the case study regions, but more to the attributes that this forest promotes, so to say. So there is kind of slight possibility to also apply them without the case study regions, but to be sure, of course, to be sure that the results are valid, you can, of course, do sub-regions, so to say, in the case study regions. This is always possible, and then, yeah, extrapolation has to be defined then specifically.
Thank you very much. Let's continue with a coffee in our hands, if you agree. Thank you very much, work package leaders. See you all in 15 minutes, please. The coffee is outside. 15 minutes, please. Thank you.